Thank you very much. And first want to thank, Stephen and Paul and the whole PAC Partners Group, as well as CBA for the invitation today. It's been great to hear some of the speakers in the morning. I probably didn't know the size of cargo. I probably didn't know that shellfish actually are sort of taking nitrogen out and purifying the water. So lots of interesting learnings. I love shellfish. Like Kelly from Nutrien, I come originally from a small town in Canada. Didn't have a name. It was just called Rural Route Number 1. It's near a town called New Hamburg. My parents weren't farmers, they were teachers, but they believed that growing up in a farming community was a wonderful place to grow up, and it was. And in fact, it was a Mennonite farming community. So we had both the old order Mennonites and the new order Mennonites. And while it will date me considerably, if you ever watched the Harrison Ford movie Witness, I've been at some of those barn raising bees, and to watch a whole community get together and raise a barn with no power and no electricity and no modern tools is truly a sight to behold. And I think that sense of community that we had was something that attracted me to Bega, and I joined Bega in October of last year. And I wanted to start, before I get into some of the topics on sustainable cash flow and sustainability, I wanted to give a couple of slides on Bega itself. It's probably a name that you've heard, but there's probably a little bit more to it in terms of portfolio and business streams than maybe you're aware of. So Bega actually, long before this chart starts, back in the 1990s, it started in the Bega Valley on the Sapphire Coast, a beautiful place. And I went there in October when I started last year for our AGM. And I'm used to, with some of the previous companies I've worked for, like Treasury Wine Estates and Mondelez, I'm more used to AGMs that occur in, glitzy towers in Sydney or Melbourne. Actually, on the Sapphire Coast at the Bega AGM, it's mostly farmers. And what a fascinating bunch of individuals to talk to. They've got lots of stuff to discuss with you: the size of herds, the scarcity of labor. How's Farmgate milk going to develop in the next year? So a very different sort of an AGM in my first month. But if you go back to that town of Bega on the Sapphire Coast in the 1990s, the company started with 2 small sites, Ridge and Lagoon Street, and less than $100 million of sales. And in the 3 decades since then, we'll do well over $3 billion of sales this year. So a lot of acquisitions in that time, a lot of organic growth. But that mission of creating great food for a better future is something that very much infuses the company. In the last decade, they've seen a couple of very transformational acquisitions. Obviously, back in 2017, we brought Vegemite in the peanut butter portfolio on board, which was purchased from Mondelez. And I must say, I've been really pleased to have that in our portfolio over the last year. It's actually Vegemite's 100th anniversary this year. And I'll talk a little bit more later on about how you can leverage truly great brands to create sustainable cash flow and to lead the success of a company. More recently, in 2021, again, a transformational acquisition occurred with the purchase of dairy and drinks business from Lion. And again, what you're seeing is a theme here in the journey of Bega. And what I want to talk to you about is, what does that look like in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years? One of the things that it looks like when you see this timeline is a company that 20 or 30 years ago was rooted more in industrial things, in commodities like skim milk powders or whole milk powders, now starting to turn into a predominantly branded business. It's different muscles that you need as a branded business. It's different capabilities that you need as a branded business. And as I go through that, I'll talk about that and how those things can lead to sustainable cash flows. First of all, this chart, some of the headwinds in the dairy industry, and it's one that we trot out at every half year, results announcement. And what you're looking at here is you're looking at things like commodities in that sort of red squiggly line, and they were certainly very elevated 6, 8, 10 months ago. So dairy commodities, skim milk powders, whole milk powders, MPCs, WPCs, there's dozens and dozens of combinations. And I think one of the things that struck me in the first 8 or 9 months I've been at Bega is the complexity of dairy. Having spent nearly 10 years working in wine and alcoholic beverages, I always saw wine is very complicated. It's a great dinner party conversation. You know, am I blending my Cabernet with a Merlot, and am I blending across vintages? And, you know, you can imagine instantaneously the kind of complexity that comes from dozens and dozens of different grape varietals and vintages, and how that might be complex. But probably before I started at Bega, I didn't realize the complexity of what you can do with a liter of milk. And again, dozens and dozens of different combinations when you separate the fats from the skims and what you do with each of those. Success in that industry is being able to play across brands that have high margins, but also being able to access some of those commodity streams. They're rising and falling continuously over the years, and your ability to move your milk into different combinations as returns move, that's what creates resilience. That's what creates sustainable cash flows. So in that red, you've seen commodities sort of spiking up, and now recently in the last several months coming off quite a bit. The next 12 to 24 months will be harder for pure play commodity producers in the dairy industry. Commodity prices have come off a great deal. In the green and blue, you start to see some of the information on milk prices. And farm gate milk has been going up, you know, straight for almost 5 or 6 years. I'm not going to stand here today and speculate to you on what's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 days, but by 2 p.m. on this Thursday, all the major milk producers have to post their minimum pricing on their website. So we're no exception to that. Again, I won't trot out my crystal ball for this meeting. What I will say from this chart, and it's not a mystery, is that the next 12 to 24 months, tougher for commodities, right? But a real opportunity for brands. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the capabilities that you need to have as a branded producer in the dairy and food space to really unlock growth over many years. First of all, it's about the business model. And as I mentioned, you know, we've got two main parts to our business. We've got the branded business, and then we've got the bulk sort of processing business. And that business on the bulk side, it's not just here in Australia, it's an international one. So the importance of farm gate milk prices that we'll decide over the next week or two, that actually speaks to the competitiveness of the Australian dairy industry at a global level. How much or how little we can play in the dairy industry. The prices we pay our farmers, they're going to be a big determinant in that. Now, the majority of Bega's business is domestic. Well over 90% of our sales are right here in ANZ, right? But an opportunity to sell to regions like Southeast Asia and the Middle East, which have over 4 billion people, right? Tremendous growth opportunity in the future. And as we look over the next 5 to 10 years, one of the big questions we're investing in and we're considering is, how do we really ramp up? Can we double that export business in the next 5 or 10 years? What are the product lines that will be successful? How do we leverage our brands to be able to do that? It's probably not going to be Vegemite. Coming from North America, I think there's a tendency to spread Vegemite thick like peanut butter. That doesn't work terribly well. And so last Friday, I was downtown at a sort of a circularity sustainability conference and met some people from the US who had tried Vegemite and were a little bit disparaging about Vegemite. So I coached them, don't spread it like peanut butter, just a thin little bit, mozzarella, a bit of tomato or avocado. That's how you want to eat your Vegemite. But other parts of our portfolio, processed cheeses, natural cheeses, yogurts, these represent tremendous opportunities. And Australia is seen as a high quality producer of foods. It has great credibility overseas. And whether it's wine or it's foods, people believe in the quality. They believe in a place that really has the right combination of regulations, capability, and growing lands to create good, safe, flavorful food products. So how do we take advantage of that and grow? It's a good question. Strong brand portfolio. Now, how do you leverage a strong brand portfolio? You know, we've been lucky through these acquisitions to get brands like Vegemite and the peanut butter franchise. Dare iced coffee in petrol and convenience is almost the size of Coca-Cola, to give you a sense. Right? The tradie walks in the morning, gets the meat pie and a couple of Dare iced coffees, and is off off to their job, right? So how do you leverage that? Well, one of the things you got to build as a capability inside a branded company is what I call pricing and promotion excellence. And it's a data science. Contributing to that are digital things, but there's information. And what I'm delighted in my first several months at Bega is we have a lot of information. Whether you're buying things like Quantium or Nielsen or IQVIA data, you get a sense of what's happening out in the marketplace. And building capability within your teams to look at millions of historical price points and promotions and understand if I promote something at $7.99 instead of $6.99, actually do I get a much better profit result even if the volume is a little lower? That's a predictive science, right? And those predictive sciences you have to unlock within a large scale branded organization. And if you do it, you can expand your margin. Margins in the food business are tighter than other FMCG businesses I've worked in. And I've been in FMCG for 30 years. So compared to vitamins that are in the 50s or Penfolds that's in the 70s or 80s, right? Food is much bigger scale, but it starts with a tighter margin. The opportunity for us as Bega becomes more of a branded company is to unlock margin growth. And you do that through driving your mix into higher margin parts of your portfolio, and you do it through pricing and promotional excellence. But to do that, you need data and digital capabilities. So we're investing in those when we're ramping them up. And the investments are in systems, and they're in processes, and they're in people. And those are vital investments. So what we want to be doing is selling a lot more of the dare ice coffee. We want to be leveraging, Yoplait and Farmers Unions in part of our yogurt portfolio. That's a very strong portfolio. To the extent that we can be pushing more of our volume and more of our mix into portfolios that have that kind of branded strength and that consumers have in their pantries, peanut butters and Vegemites, it will be accretive to our margin. So managing mix and managing price are among two of the most important things that we can possibly do. It's also been great to have some non-dairy in our portfolio. If you look at our purpose, creating great food for a better future, it doesn't just say dairy. We have a huge dairy component to our business. But I'll tell you what, during the pandemic, when everybody in Melbourne was locked down for 2 years, and even here in Sydney, we were home a little bit more often, a lot of people were eating more Vegemite on their toast, right? And you know what? Some of that habit hasn't faded after COVID passed away. So that acquisition has really proven itself 5 years later as being a tremendous acquisition that's generating a lot of cash. What do the next 12, 24, 36 months look like? They're not going to be about huge transformative acquisitions. We have a lot of the tools. We've got several great dairy brands. We got brands like Vegemite and in the peanut butter space. It's really going to be about taking these great tools we have and making them hum as a single one Bega unit. And I get a sense, having been there for a while, that huge progress has been made, but the integration isn't fully done yet. And there's so much opportunity ahead of Bega to really act like one company and finish that job of integrating. It's only 2 years since the Lion Dairy and Drinks acquisition. Cultural change takes 3 to 5 years to really align, if we're truthful as companies. So the opportunity for Bega to do that and really lift its results over time, it's definitely there. If I take Vegemite as a case study, when you have a really strong brand, you can do some interesting, different things for it. There's selling your product. There's coming up with new innovations. Absolutely vital. That's your bread and butter, and how you do that's important. But with a brand that sort of is in the national consciousness like Vegemite, I mean, this year we launched a series of coins for the 100th anniversary with the Australian Mint. They sold out in weeks. Right? We have a fairly robust licensing business. Lestac is not one of our brands, but we license the Vegemite name and flavor to that brand, and that's been very successful. And if you look across it, whether it's been clothing, footwear, coins, or foods in other categories that can use that great savory Vegemite flavor, the opportunity to do licensing spreads your brand and your awareness out to a much greater group of consumers. That helps margins. That helps sustainable cash flow. We've got 20 sites around the country, a lot of capability. One challenge we face as a company, it's been said many times, is in the dairy processing industry, There's still too much steel. There's still too many tanks. So one of the questions that we face is how do you optimize margins in spite of that fact? The milk pool is lower in Australia than it was 5, 10 years ago. So start to think about not just within your own walls as a company, but within some of your competitors in the industry. Are there tolling opportunities that you could have with other competitors? Can you process some of their milk? Can they process some of yours? What capabilities do each of you have that can make you thrive and make you more robust as an industry? So that concept of thinking outside your own walls and then streamlining your own network. How do you unlock opportunities in margin and cash from doing that? With 20 sites and we own all of them, there's still a lot of opportunity in front of us here at Bega. I won't spend a lot of time on the detail of this slide, but the basics of really sweating working capital is so important. Receivables is tough. You got some big customers, Coles, Woolworths, the Nationals. Are they necessarily going to pay you earlier than their terms? Probably not. So I've often found receivables to be a tough area to make progress. But actually, inventory and payables are great places to look if you're trying to generate cash flow. Within the payables area, if you're not going to get paid any sooner, you're looking for partners that will fairly share with you the burden of the payment cycle in this industry. For small suppliers, there's a payment times reporting scheme, so you're definitely paying them in 30 days or less. But the focus is on the medium to large suppliers and how you partner with them to create the right cash flows in the industry. Right? So that can unlock value for all parties. And inventory is probably the best one. That's really about planning excellence. It doesn't sound sexy, but your integrated planning processes, what's my regular updates of demand? What are my factories making? How often are they producing it? How much inventory are they holding it and where? So vital, and it's the backbone of your business. And if integrated planning is doing well, it actually becomes the main decision-making forum for your business. So we're trying to align or recommit to aligning our business behind one integrated planning framework that elevates the main decisions to the right people and has a regular cadence that unlocks success. Very important. If you can do that, you can optimize inventory, but actually you can optimize decision making. Spend a minute or two, I'm going to ask 3 on sustainability and the circular economy. And a lot of efforts going on. We've invested millions in moving our big dairy production lines in Wetherill Park to recycled PET blow molding. We've just gone live on that a few months ago. That's really to meet our commitments under APCO and try to position ourselves for much greater use of sustainable packaging and input materials. But more exciting for us, our chairman, Barry Irvin, is leading what he calls the Bega circularity experiment. So we have a co-op together of a few companies, and we'll be building a little circularity center in our heartland of Bega. We'll be reaching out to 50 or 60 farmers, beginning to track some scope 3 information over the next 2 or 3 years. So it's both about the processor side of the business and also an outreach in Bega. And because it's such a lovely community, if we can build the microcosm of a sustainable industry in Bega, how can it eventually apply to the whole nation's or indeed the whole world's, dairy industry? That's the kind of thing that sometimes it's best to start as a microcosm and build from there. Dare Iced Coffee's had a big year. Not only has it moved from HDPE to recycled PET over the last few months, but we've also signed up with the Rainforest Alliance to make sure that our input materials are sustainably sourced. What we found is that consumers, 70 or 80%, are demanding sustainable products. Probably only 10 or 20% are willing to pay for it. So, like some of the comments earlier on, sustainability is finding those win-wins where it helps you unlock sustainable cash and profit growth, but it also delivers on consumer expectations in a way that doesn't cost them a lot more money. That balance is tough, but it's not impossible, and I feel we're making great progress. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Bega's journey is about moving from just an industrial commodity company to really one that's dominated by 70 or 80% branded businesses. For us to do that, we're going to have to build new capabilities or stronger capabilities in areas like strategic revenue management, managing our mix. We're going to have to look hard at our footprint. Where does it make sense to own? Where does it make sense to partner? Where does it make sense to streamline? You got to get very focused on CapEx. We're investing in areas like digital. Our B2B portals are going to be a big focus over the next year. And then areas that are bread and butter like working capital are important. If we can do all these well, we can deliver on the promise that is Bega, and I know it's there over the next 3 to 5 years. Thank you very much.
Bring it up to the end, Jeff.